So, good evening, good evening, good evening, and a very, very, very warm welcome to this evening's talk. This series has been carrying on since September, so we're very excited about that. This evening is being recorded, so please be aware of that, and it will be made public on our website. So if you don't want to be seen, switch off. So today is a very, very important day, and there are three reasons for that. The first is that the Climate Change Council published a brand new report in which they're telling the government what they have to do in order to stop climate change from being such a disaster. So over the next 30 years, they're talking about getting rid of oil and gas boilers, getting rid of petrol cars, and reducing meat consumption. So there you are, they're absolutely telling the government what to do. So I think that's quite exciting. The second reason why today is a very, very special day is because we have Paul Morris to speak to us about trees. That's probably even more exciting. And the third reason is that I'm really hoping, yes, she's here already. We have a visitor from Zambia. Her name's Namwaka. I'm not going to speak to her now, but after Paul has finished speaking and after we've had a chance for you to ask questions, I would very much like to introduce her because she is a Zambian tree planter. So she's a very, very exciting person for us to meet. So let's get on with the main event. Very excited to introduce you to Paul Morris, who is going to talk to us on the subject of trees. What are they good for? Let's give him a hand.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Penson. Thank you for that. Yeah, I thought I'd just give you a little who I am actually before I start talking about trees. Yeah, my name's Paul Morris. I was born at a very young age and I come from a place near God's country, which is up in Liverpool. I am now I'm 58 years old and I've been in forestry since I was 17 years old. So that's all I've done for a living. Grown up with, I actually worked for a Christian organisation down here in Gerrards Cross after I finished doing forestry college at the age of 21. And I worked there for a few years. And then I set up my own small forestry business here in Chalfont St Peter. And that's been going for 36 years now. So I do have a passion for trees. I wouldn't say I was a tree hugger. I'm more of a tree stroker. I'm not so passionate but I do have a passion that I want trees to be in our environment. And I'm going to talk a little bit what a tree is and almost like going back into like a bit of tree biology. So I'm going to start from there. Now I need to tell you that I am to public speaking what Long John Silver is to cross country running. So I might flit here, there and everywhere. So hopefully you can keep up with me. So I'm going to just start off with a little bit of, I kind of call it 20 questions. It's not actually 20 questions, but it's what people might think or might ask of a person of what a tree. I mean, trees, what are they good for? Is quite a big subject. So let's go say, firstly, what is a tree? Now, a tree is quite a simple question, and simplistically, a tree is a large woody organism, but it can cover a lot of things. I mean, there are tree shrubs like your Portuguese laurel that most of you would probably have in your own garden, right up to like an oak tree that also you might have in your garden. And the definition works better than like that. You would say a tree is a single stem, quite often, that has a head that creates a lot of leaf. And then the tree can be kind of put into two categories. That's the broadleaf trees or conifers. And broadleaves would be termed angiosperms. Now, angiosperms are a tree that creates a seed that has a covering, so like an apple. So you have an apple and you have the seeds inside, whereas conifers, cypresses, are referred to as gymnosperms, and they're naked seeds. So when you see a cypress tree or say a pine tree, if I give you some idea. Now here, if you can see that, this is the cone of a Scots pine, and that would be known as a naked seed. So that is a conifer. And the botanical name, now I might use botanical names throughout the talk, and that's because it's a Latin name, and the Latin name for Scots pine is Pinus sylvestris. And the reason why we use the Latin names is because other people of different countries, like a tree person, say in Holland, would call a common name of a pine tree different to us, but he would know, or they would know, or she would know the botanical name or the Latin name. So it's very important. But you do have slight differences within conifers and broadleaves, because you can get what's known as deciduous conifers. Now, deciduous conifers might be a larch tree, which is very common in our country, or maybe the dawn redwood, which is known as the fossil tree, and that comes from China, and that was only rediscovered in 1950. They thought it had become extinct, and it's probably one of my favorite botanical names for a tree. And the botanical name for a dawn redwood is Metasequoia glypstroptoboides. Now, I'd like you to remember that, because I'm going to start doing a bit of a test at the end. And also, I need this, as I talk, you probably hear a lot of information. You think, are you really serious? Is that really the truth? So within my little talk now, I am going to tell you one lie. And at the end, I'm going to ask what that lie might be. So you'll have to put your listening ears on and to think about it. Okay, so there are lots of species of trees in the world, maybe to 80,000 to 100,000 species of trees in our world. And this all puts it down to the tree and what it does for us. And if have a basic botany lesson here, I've got a piece of wood here, okay? And I've you probably can't really see it very well, but I've put some lines on it. That's where they are called the annual rings, okay? And then also that goes round the circumference, but they have these, they're called the medullary rays that come out from the center of the tree, okay? And they form what's known as compartmentalization within the tree. Now, here on the outside, you have the bark, which is the phellodern or the phellogen, and that's basically like the skin of the tree. And depending on what kind of tree it is, depends on the protection. Now, for us, we have skin, our epidermis, which is very important to us because it keeps all the blood, all the organisms all in the right place. A little bit different in trees, because if you damage a tree and you open up the bark, and you open up the wood underneath, you can damage the tree completely. I've seen some people who damage the tree and they call it ring barking. And that's where they take a layer of bark all the way around the circumference of the tree, and that's it, the tree is dead. It will not survive, because you've actually broken where the tree is. Because inside you have the heartwood right in the middle of the tree, and then on the outside you have what's known as the vascular bundle. And that is a very important part of the tree, because that carries the phloem and the xylem cells of the tree, and that allows the water and the nutrients to go up and down the tree. Because obviously you have the roots that have osmosis, and they absorb the water and all the nutrients, the trace elements, and take it up the tree. It's almost like a lift kind of going up the tree. And it's a similar thing like that, because you have what's known as the transpiration pull from the leaves, okay? And then the leaves are very important, because obviously you have the chlorophyll, which absorbs the light from the sun and it creates foodstuffs. Now, if you take the leaves off a tree during midsummer, you will kill the tree as well. Or some trees are very, very clever, and they will re-leaf and they will survive. Now, there are some very clever trees in the world. Now, I'm going to just talk to you about let's see if I can get it on my finger. Now, this is very difficult. On my finger, I have the biggest living organism in the world. Can you see that? Very, very small. Now, that is the seed of the giant redwood, Sequoiadendron giganteum. And it comes from the west coast of America, like most things. And I have the cone of it here. That is the cone of the giant redwood. Now, this is a very important tree to me. This is from a tree in America. I shouldn't have really done it, called the Grizzly Adams tree. And it was one of my bucket lists to go and see the giant redwoods in America. And I went to see them. They are just stupendous. Now, in America, you have the giant redwoods, but also you have the tallest trees, which are the Sequoia sempervirens. They are the biggest trees in the world. And also you have the oldest trees in the world. The oldest tree in the world is the bristlecone pine. It's also known as Methuselah. Now, Methuselah was a character in the Bible. He was nigh on 950 years old, because the oldest tree in the world is the bristlecone pine, and it's reputed to be around about 4,600 years old. Now, if you think about that, that's quite an amazing amount of time. And if you've ever been to the Natural History Museum, up on the second level, they have a piece of giant redwood, a ring, and it's around about 2,000 years old by you counting down the annual rings. And this giant redwood in the Natural History Museum, it kind of plots certain things like when Jesus was born and when Oliver Cromwell was around, all these kind of, it's a really amazing bit of wood. Now, the giant redwood, I kind of just, it's one of my favorite trees because it is a very clever tree. Because trees, predominantly, they would be termed the lungs of the world. I mean, the Amazon is really known as the lungs of the world. And if you were to eradicate the Amazon completely, it would really put us into a big, big problem as regards to the world. Because obviously, it's like telling a granny how to suck eggs, because you know that trees absorb carbon dioxide and they give out oxygen. And they do it all the time. Even in nighttime, they do it. They don't necessarily have to have sunlight to create the oxygen. They can still absorb carbon dioxide. Now, the giant redwood is, this is one that I'd just like to explain. They're a very clever tree because they're in America on the West Coast, and they have these very small cones, as I've just shown. They have around about a circumference in old money of around about 100 feet around the base of the tree. You might have seen pictures of them on the internet where they've actually put massive big tunnels through them and they've driven cars through them. So if you have not seen it, it's quite an amazing little bit of pictures that show that. Now, the giant redwood lives in a very harsh environment. They suffer from a lot of fires there. Now, the bark of a giant redwood is around about a meter thick, and it's very spongy. You can punch it and you don't hurt your hand. If you see any redwoods in this country, go up to one and give it a punch and it won't hurt. It's that, it's quite soft. And what happens is when they have the forest fires, it burns all the undergrowth. The tree is protected from the fire with the bark it has. And the fire creates all the heat to go up through the canopy, and the cones dry out and then they ping. And all the seeds, the ones that I just showed you, they would probably have around about 2,000 seeds in one cone. The seeds drop down onto a bare earth and then they regenerate. A very clever tree that it can survive those kind of harsh environments. And a lot of trees are very, very similar. They adapt themselves to the environment that they are in. And we just talked about the trees rings. The annual rings of a tree show how old it is. Now, if I just show you again with this piece of wood, you'll notice the annual rings that I've drawn, some are a lot bigger or a lot wider than the others. And that would indicate that it's had a very good growing year, or it's had a very bad growing year. Sometimes if we've had a very bad summer, the actual annual rings will be a lot closer together. Or we've had a very good year, like this one, it's shown it's like a centimetre of growth. That's the increment of the stem. Now, this was a bit of ash tree that we had to take down because it had died from that ash dieback recently. So they are affected by certain things. And trees, okay, with their leaves, I was talking about they have the deciduous trees. There is a deciduous conifer that is now used as a street tree, and a lot of people use them, and it's called Ginkgo biloba. It's the maidenhair tree. So if you think of maidenhead, whenever I think of certain trees, I always try and think of something that would remind me of it. When I was at forestry college, we had to learn 40 trees a week for tree identification. And then we were tested every week on these trees. I remember we had a little bit of a set to, because one week we had a group of alpines on our tree identification, and we boycotted it, the tree people on our course anyway. So predominantly we looked at trees, and we have certain trees that grow quick and certain trees that grow very, very slowly. Now, yew trees, which in our country there are a lot, and there are a lot in like churchyards, and the botanical name for yew trees is Taxus baccata. Now, we talk about trees, what are they good for? It's not just that they do create oxygen for us to breathe, but there are certain things that trees have. Now, the yew tree is a very interesting one because they create what's known as Taxil, and they've actually used it in the treatment of breast cancer. A few years ago, we had people who used to come, and we used to cut yew hedges with the little needles, and then it's dried and it's created this this treatment for breast cancer. And now they use different types of treatments for breast cancer, and they don't normally use yew branches, but it's still the same principle. I mean, sometimes a lot of people think that trees are just that, sometimes just something nice to look at. Or in an urban environment, it has been noticed that if you have a lot of trees in a certain area, it brings down the temperature in a certain area. It also gives us shade, which is very, very important. And all these things, and it kind of improves the well-being of people. When we have the spring flush, when things kind of really start to happen, and you get that first little bit of growth that comes, normally it's the chestnut trees come early. They're the first trees to happen. And then you'll have ash, and then you'll have oak, and they all do it at different times, because certain trees react to certain things. Like when the temperature rises, oaks start to produce the leaf. When you have more sunshine, ash starts to produce their leaves as well. So certain trees are affected by certain conditions. So trees, I keep on referring to it, what are they good for? Is they're good for everything. They have an amazing effect on us. If you were to use, like, if you had a street, say, if you know certain areas of Chalfont St Peter, there are certain avenues or certain roads that have avenues of trees. Like in Orchil Avenue, they have predominantly lime trees along the road. And if you were to take them all down and take them away, it would be completely different. It wouldn't be very nice at all. So they have this psychological thing because they are good for us. Now, I want to just go back to the biggest tree in the world. The giant redwood. There were two of them that competed for the biggest tree in the world, and it was the General Sherman and the General Grant. And the weight of these trees, I said they were the largest living thing in the world. They are 25,000 people in weight. So if you think of, should we say, Wembley Stadium, a third of Wembley Stadium, that's how heavy one single tree, giant redwood, is in America. A very, very heavy tree. And it all came from that one little seed. Quite an amazing thing. So we kind of gone through oldest trees, biggest trees. Sometimes we have rarest trees, and people, the rarest trees are kind of ones that are certain natives to certain islands. Now, in our country, we are an island, and we have native trees, and a lot of native trees. We have chestnut, we have oak, ash, beech, all these kind of trees, or mountain ash. Some people think of sycamore as a naturalized tree. That's come from another country. They're thinking they might have changed their minds, and they think it might be a native, or a type of sycamore might be a native, because it seems like they've been here since time immemorial and they haven't come from another country. And then one of the other things is we're talking about the trees and seed production. Now I have a few examples here of pine cones. This is part of my pine cone collection. This is of a radiator pine, Pinus radiata, and this actually was on the tree in the Lee, which is a little village in South Buckinghamshire. Now, this is the unopened one, okay? And a cone this size will create, again, probably around about 200 seeds. Now, sometimes they're viable. Sometimes they will become seedlings and they will start to become trees. But most trees aren't viable, the seeds, if they've been grown from a grafted tree. And this one, if this fell out of a tree and hit you on the head, this would be very painful, okay? Whereas the Pinus sylvestris, the pine tree, the actual Scots pine, which is a native, that's not too bad at all. I remember when I was a kid, we used to have pine cone fights, and it was they weren't open like this. It was normally when they'd just been just started to come into fruition, and they were really hard green things. Now, trees, what are they good for? It's not just the tree itself, but it's what actually happens within the tree. The tree creates quite a habitat for animals and insects and things like that. Now, for instance, probably the most species that is created within a tree is the willow tree. And then sometimes probably around about 450 species of bugs, animals would use a willow tree. Oak trees come in a second of about 423 species. And then you have other trees like sycamore. Now, you'll probably know this if you park your car under a sycamore tree during the summer months, and you get a lot of aphids. Now, aphids, people don't like aphids, but lots of other animals, lots of other insects like aphids, so they feed on them. Now, one interesting thing about the sycamore, which creates green aphid, or green aphids like to be there, when you shake the branches, is the green aphid, it sucks the sap from the leaves. It puts its proboscis in, sucks the actual sugar out, and it can't handle it, so it goes straight through its body and it comes out the other end. And it actually alights onto the leaves. And if you just taste it ever so slightly, now I don't recommend it because it's called honeydew, and it's basically aphid poo. And if you just ever so slightly, it's slightly sweet. And what actually happens is this gooey honeydew, it either gets on your car, and you know it's been on your car because it's a real sticky and it's really hard to get off, but it alights on the other leaves, and any pollution in the atmosphere, like dust and things, alights on it, and it creates these black patches. You might have seen this on sycamore leaves or on Norway maples, these black splodges, and then part of the leaf will die back. And it's actually called tar spots. It's one of the things that actually affects plants. It just affects the actual trees ability to create foodstuffs. A little bit like horse chestnut. You might have known of the chestnut scale moth that affects chestnuts during mid-season, June, July. A lot of leaves start to die and it looks like autumn has come early. And again, it doesn't really affect the tree so much, but the tree can get a different disease, and that's called bleeding canker. It's a little bit like us when we feel under the weather, like we've got a cold or something, and our defenses go down a bit, we can feel and we can catch other things, which is not very nice either. And that's a similar kind of process in that. So we talked about what trees are good for. They're good for our health. They're because of the oxygen they give. They're good for our psychological well-being because they're great to look at. They give us shade and they are good to look at. I mean, there's so many different types. I used to have a tree outside my front garden called the honey locust tree. And that's called Triganthos. And that comes from the Med. It comes from like Israel. And it's called the honey locust because it was thought that John the Baptist used to eat it. And it's one of these things. It's probably a little bit of a myth that he did eat that, but he used to use, honey locusts. It was like he used to feed on locusts and he used to feed on honey. And I think they just used that a little bit. So certain things are used to help people, not just for good, but also to create food or things like that. Now, just before I finish, and if you did have any questions, I wanted just to put it back to you, because there has to be some kind of response if anybody talks about something, we can give it a response, and whether that is a positive one or a negative one, or just kind of here, there, or not really positive or negative. And that question is, what can we do? When my children were a lot younger, I have 3 boys and they're all in their 20s now, but when they were like 2, 3 or 4, this time of the year, we used to get a handful of acorns that we'd found. Now this year, you probably know it's been a very good seed production year. And there's been a lot of acorns, there's been a lot of apples, lots of things like that. And we used to get a handful of, or get a bag full of acorns, and we'd walk off down the road in the fields, and we'd make little holes in the ground and just put the acorns in, a bit like being human squirrels. And that's a very basic thing that children can do. We can all do. You can plant a tree, like the parish council do, or like people like Tree Aid. That's one of the charities we support. And a knock-on effect of that is I have a friend of mine who actually is in Senegal, and in partnership with him, we've been planting a few forests. And those forests are basically, they create these trees that create around the boundary, and they're fruit trees. So they create food. They also create firewood. They also create protection. And so they do everything for the people in these villages in Senegal. I think the actual people are called the Falula tribe, which is, it's great for them. But also they have these little forests that we've helped them to plant. Now, we actually haven't helped them to plant it. They have actually done it themselves. And we've just provided maybe some tools and the actual seeds or the plants for them to plant. Also, we could do something like join the Woodland Trust or the Tree Council. They're always up for people who want to be volunteers in planting trees or maybe donating something. Very, very important. So trees, what are they good for? Well, it's a bit of a no-brainer for me. They are worth so much to us, whether that's psychologically or our health or everything. So here endeth the lesson, Jane.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I have got no idea what your lie was, but we'll ask other people what they think it was. I've certainly learned a huge amount. I'm not sure I remember all those Latin names, but it's still very useful to know all about that. Also, I'm thinking pollinators are benefit from having trees around, don't they?
Yeah,
and we need
yeah.
pollinators, so there must be just so many things you didn't have time to talk about. Trees are good for everything, as you say. So thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
And I'm going to give people a chance to ask questions. So I'm going to change the view so I can see everyone, and also open the chat box. So please, anybody who'd like to ask a question, either wave your hand or put a note in the chat box. Desmond Hall is waving his hand.
Oh, is he now? He always is.
He is. He's going to have to unmute himself. There he goes.
Hi.
Oh, there he is now.
Paul.
Yes.
Are you worried about all these diseases we hear about? Because we've lost the elms. You talked about ash dieback.
Yeah.
We've heard oaks are threatened with something or other.
Yeah.
I believe on the continent olive trees are very threatened.
Yeah.
So it all seems very worrying. Is this very serious, do you think?
Well, it can be. I mean, take for instance the elm trees. I mean, when I first started, we took down a lot of dead elm or dying elm trees where up north. But there are two areas in England, that is Brighton and the Isle of Man, who still have elm trees, street tree elm trees. And that's because they were very, very strict. When they thought that the tree had got the disease, it was taken down straight away and burnt. And so it allowed the other healthy trees to carry on. Also, it kind of has caused the tree industry to start to do other strains. Now, the Siberian elm, which is very similar to the English elm, is not susceptible to Dutch elm disease. And now Dutch elm disease is a bit a misnomer. It really should be American elm disease, because the actual bad strain of the Dutch elm or the American elm disease came from America. Okay, now there are still elm trees in our country. They get up to a certain height and then they get reinfected by the disease, which is not very good. But every so often you'll get one that will see his way through. And I saw an elm tree the other day, an English elm, quite a nice species. But as regards the oak trees and the ash, yeah, it is a little bit worrying, because certain trees get taken down because they think they've got like ash dieback, and quite often they haven't. The Forestry Commission are trying to find out how they're actually spread. Now, ash dieback is a very interesting one because they think it's spread through rain splash, which would indicate that most of the trees that are affected are in woodlands and they're young trees. So if you have an individual tree in your garden, an ash tree, probably it'd be very rare that that would be suffering from ash dieback. It might be just dying of old age.
How do you spot dieback?
Right. Well, ash dieback is very similar to just dieback because it starts to die from the top of the tree downwards, and you get these very large bits of dead wood right in the top of the canopy. And that's an indication of dieback, and it can be ash dieback. The difference is very hard to tell. Very hard to tell. Normally in that situation, if it was a large tree and it was starting to have dieback, you would reduce the tree considerably below where the dieback was, so the tree might survive. If it carried on, it probably would be ash dieback. So you're giving the tree a chance, really.
I think you've answered her question, because there was a question here. What's the latest on ash dieback? I have big ashes in my garden. What do I do if I spot dieback? Leave them or fell them? I've seen suggestions that dieback may not necessarily kill them.
No, they're absolutely right. The ash dieback might not kill them. It's like a lot of other diseases, like Maripolis, that affects beech trees. If you've ever seen a tree, predominantly beech trees, and they have the fungus at the bottom, they look like big dinner plates. Especially this time of the year, they're very prevalent. And they used to, if the tree suffered from that, it would think, oh, we've got to get rid of it. So a lot of people get rid of the tree, and but these days they start to maybe do a reduction of the tree just to see if the tree will survive. And that's, they're just trying to be a little bit more careful these days, should I say, as opposed to just taking them out straight away. But myself personally, I am a little bit worried about the oak wilt that came about a few years ago, because there's quite a few of the oak trees around here that have actually succumbed to it, but others haven't. And that's the good thing, because some will not succumb to it. They almost like set up a protection. I don't know if you know, in certain woodlands, you have trees that are affected by a certain disease, and as they go through the woodland, it gets less and less and less. It's like the trees have communicated. They give off these pheromones that actually protect the rest of the woodland. So yeah, it's the oak wilt I'm concerned about. But, yeah.
So I've only got one guess so far about what your lie was.
Go on then.
Was the lie the reference to the biggest organism in the world when Paul showed us just the seed of the giant redwood?
No, that wasn't the lie. But I have to tell you, it's got something to do with the redwood.
Yeah, I think it was the grizzly.
Oh, hello, young Marcus.
Hello, Paul.
What was your guess, Mary?
I think it was when you mentioned something, it was the grizzly tree or something, wasn't it?
No, there definitely is a tree called the grizzly tree. Yeah.
Okay.
Any more guesses? Walter?
Shall I put you out your misery?
There's somebody who's Walter who wants to offer a guess.
Go on then, Walter.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good. Trees come in old wives' tales, and the news sometimes is weather forecasting. What in your experience
I can't hear
He's
him.
gone
Really,
silent. I
Walter.
can't hear.
Sorry.
We can't hear you.
If you're talking about, I think you're talking about weather forecasts. Do trees forecast the weather? Is that what you're saying?
oak and ash, the rhyme?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, like I said before, they are affected by the weather, and certain trees will produce their leaves early, and some trees will lose their leaves early. And it is indicative of the weather that's happening around them. They are, for their environment, they adapt themselves to the environment that they're in and the weather that they're in as well.
But that wasn't the lie.
No, wasn't the lie.
Okay,
Shall I tell you what the lie was?
go on.
I said the weight of the tree
Oh.
was a third of was 25,000. It's actually 35,000 people weigh the same as one single giant redwood. Wow. So that's half Wembley Stadium.
Unbelievable.
So that is quite a tree.
One more quick question. What are the best trees to grow in a small garden for wildlife?
Ooh, excellent. Well, one of my favorite trees is types of mountain ash. It's a native tree. We refer to them as a non-tree surgery tree. So you should be able to plant it and not have to do any pruning to it. Because basically, if you can avoid pruning a tree, cutting it, that's the best thing for it. Try and put the tree surgeon out of business. So the mountain ash, or types of mountain ash, now the botanical name is sorbus. So if you were to go to a nursery and look for sorbus, you can have different types, like the Sorbus Joseph Rock. It's a great tree for small gardens, and it creates these lovely pinnate leaves, have these really nice white flowers, and it creates nice fruit, not edible fruit, but it looks really nice. And then it has this brilliant autumn colour. Most mountain ashes have great autumn colour. And that you probably know that autumn colour is all down to the breakdown of carotids or carotenes in the leaves that create the different colours. And it has different colours have different carotenes. So yeah, mountain ash or types of mountain ash, sorbus would be a good one.
Great. So Any more very quick questions? Yes, Mary Bentle has her hand up. Mary?
Nope.
I think it's Mary Bentle.
Is it me?
Yes.
I'm Jenny Owen.
I
Oh,
beg your pardon. I'm very sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. I have a conifer out the front of my house
yeah.
that in the spring seems to attract large wasps for aphids that totally coat the branches and
Yeah.
produce a real sticky, horrible residue that goes all the way down the trunk and all the way on the branches.
Yeah.
Are they something that I've left them to go? Will it actually damage the tree eventually?
No, it won't damage the tree. It's probably the resin, because the tree, like there's a skin, like our skin, we have pores that allow the sweat to come out. And this has the same thing in trees. They have what's known, they're called lenticels, and they're like little holes, and they allow the bark to breathe. And in a conifer, they have the actual sap is called resin, and it creates this kind of sticky stuff. And sometimes if there is a damage to the lenticels, this stuff will come out and it will kind of coat the bark, and certain insects are attracted to that, and that's what you get. So
it always seems to be the queen wasps.
Yes,
nothing else. It just it can, some years it's really absolutely coated in the wasps, and then like this year there weren't very many this year, but some years they've been buzzing round really quite ferociously.
Well, again, certain trees attract certain things, like lime trees attract a lot of bees that they feed off the pollen of the flowers, and quite often you'll find a lot of drunken bees at the bottom of lime trees on their backs with their legs in the air, because they are completely over wrought. They're kind of drunk on the nectar that they've got out of and it's a similar kind of thing.
What damage has been done to the tree to make it do that then? What is it?
It's not, it's just a natural phenomenon, like the resin.
It's not
out.
something that's because it's always a long time after I've done any cutting back on the tree.
No, I mean, sometimes if you cut a tree, that, and the actual wounds will exude this resin, and that's what will, you will create.
No, it's definitely not on the outside. It's always underneath all the branches. You don't see it from outside.
Okay.
You have to part the branches, and the branches are literally moving with all the aphids. Absolutely moving with it, and they leave a sort of black, dark grey, charcoal grey type residue on the branches. After the aphids are left.
Okay.
So,
well, that is probably the attraction of the resin that that's exuded by the bark.
Okay.
So I don't need to spray it.
No, don't spray it. You'll be fine.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions still in the chat, but I can save those and ask Paul separately, because I want to be able to introduce you to Namwaka. So thank you very, very much again, Paul, for your talk.
Pleasure.
There's always,
thank you.
Obviously just so much you could say that you could carry on all night, I think. But we've really enjoyed it. And yes, and we must plant acorns and plant trees and find places to plant trees, and we'll do all those things.
If you want some acorns, I've got loads of them.
Okay. Right, I'm going to share my screen for a moment, so let's just pick up this share. So I want to slideshow.
What a beautiful tree.
Slideshow from the beginning. So I am going to introduce you to a lady called Namwaka, who is a tree planter, a bit like Paul. She's an educator in that she goes into schools and talks to children in Zambia, which is where she lives, about how deforestation is a terrible thing and how they should plant trees and love trees like Paul. So she's also a conservationist. And I have not met her, but I've had lots and lots of conversations with her, because she picked up Speak Up for Our Planet on the web. I'm very excited about this. This is where she lives. So if you didn't know where Zambia was, there it is, right slap bang in the middle of the southern part of Africa, and she lives in the Western Province. And there is Namwaka on the right-hand side, busy planting trees, and her family, all with lots and lots and lots of seedlings waiting to be planted. It's a lot of hard work, I think. So protecting, watering trees in Africa, of course, is a huge, huge part of the job. And she involves the whole family. And you can see that on the left, there are various ways in which she's had to protect plants, either from human predators who want to steal them or from animal predators who want to eat them. Both happen. And there is the problem of sandy soil. And then a picture she sent me just recently, the one on the right, they were working so hard that they carried on after dark. So they're obviously just so busy. They don't even stop at when it gets dark. Yeah. And there they all are, waving to say hello. So brilliant. I am hoping that, can you hear us, Namwaka, and can you unmute yourself and say hello?
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, Namwaka.
So do you have anything to tell us, or any questions for Paul, or do you have anything you'd like to say to us?
Okay, I have a few words to share. I just want to say thank you for making me be a part of this. I'm happy to have learned a lot. I've learned so much about trees, and even though I've never seen an oak tree, but I've seen lately, I just see the oak. Is that the fruit? I've seen it on TV and in books, but I've never really seen it in real life. Yes, and I'd really love to see it, because it seems like it's a very important tree, and I was researching about it. I understand from my research that it absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
So Namwaka, what kind of trees do you plant?
For myself, I plant lemons, oranges, mangoes, apples, because I've noticed that apples are doing fine in the sandy soil, even though it is very difficult to maintain the moisture, because the sand keeps on draining the water all the time, and it's very hot out here. Yes, so the mangoes, we plant them, like after 2 years, they start, the roots will go deeper and they will get to the water table, something like that. And then they will not need to be watered regularly. But we have a problem with the lemons and the oranges, because the oranges end up being sour instead of being sweet, because they don't have enough water.
Oh, right. So,
yes.
So what's the solution then?
The solution is to, if I can manage to have a borehole drilled and then an elevated water tank, because where we live, it's a bit on top of a hill, and then the stream where we get water from is about 100 meters away from where the plants are. So it's quite a struggle. We have to carry the water from the stream downstream up the hill to where the plants are, and we carry it on in buckets. So it's quite tiresome. So due to that, the plants don't get enough water. So most of them just die like that from dehydration. So the solution is, if we can get an elevated water tank on top of where we are, then we can might use even the force of gravity to water those plants, to have them get enough water.
Right. So you need to
yes.
install a borehole.
Yes, please.
That sounds like a huge
and also
amount
some fencing.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
I'm fascinated that you're growing apple trees in Zambia. You told me that, yes.
Could we put her in touch with the local Rotary Club?
Indeed. And also, I've just had a comment on the chat from a lady whose son-in-law comes from Zambia, and he would like to plant a sustainable woodland stroke forest to support the local population. So I think that's another putting in touch that we're almost certainly going to do. Very interesting. How fascinating what you can do when you have a simple little Zoom call which goes across the world. I think we will, Namwaka, we will try and put your message out more widely and see how much interest we can get towards perhaps trying to help you a bit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where do you get your seeds for planting these? Where do you get these?
The seeds, I go to the market and pick some from the waste, market waste, those that are thrown, and some when I find the resources, I buy some that are almost going to waste because they are cheaper that way. They're the ones that I can afford. Yes.
So it's all trees that have a fruit that you're planting at the moment to help with food.
Yes, even indigenous fruit trees, indigenous trees that are found here, because most of them, they are drought resistant. So they will take, like, after 3 years, we don't need to water them. The ones that are in the forest, but due to deforestation, they're almost becoming extinct. So I'm trying also to replant such trees so that we can have them around to help us even hold and maintain the soil.
Lovely.
To stop soil erosion. Yes.
And growing lots of fruit that you can then sell to the local people.
Yes, we're growing lots of fruits to sell to the local people, because the apple fruits, they come from South Africa, so they are quite expensive. And the lemons and oranges, they are only found in here in Western Province. There are a few farmers who grow that, because it's like people have a problem with the sandy soil. So I'm trying to get that, to put it in control, like adding grass and leaves and even kitchen waste, using compost, because I felt that maybe if I did organic farming, it would be healthier for my family and my community. And by so doing, I won't need to spend a lot of money to buy fertilizers and those dangerous chemicals to spray on the plants. So I'm trying by all means to do a healthy farming for the sake of our health and for the sake of the community, and also to make sure that I don't spend a lot of money, so that at the end of the day, even when we sell those fruits, they're affordable to the community, to keep the community healthy.
You also said to me that people are less likely to steal the trees if they know they're going to be fruit trees.
Yes,
that was very interesting.
Yes, they are less likely to cut them down, because mostly they cut them down for charcoal burning. So when they know that these are fruit trees and they'll benefit from them, they'll be encouraged to take care of them, or maybe leave them alone. Yes, because they will be watching them grow, and as they grow, they'll also start having an interest to grow their own, because there are a few neighbors now who come around to ask for advice, to ask me for even lessons, how I plant the trees. I show them how I do the organic manure. I show them. So it's quite interesting. Yes, almost the whole village now is interested in planting their own fruit trees.
Great. Well
done.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Paul, do you have any last comments? Any comments for Namwaka, or anything else you want to say?
I just want to say I think that's brilliant.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
I mean, that is the idea of having a tree that can do lots of things for you. It can give you fruit, and when it does start to die, it can give you firewood. It does a lot of things, and that is just a brilliant thing to do. And hats off to you, as we say.
Yeah. And Namwaka is living in a village that she moved to because she wanted to do this work with trees. It's not where she was born. So I think I really, really admire the work she's doing. So congratulations, Namwaka, and we'll be back in touch to see what we can see if we can find any way of helping you out a bit.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Does anybody have any more comments or questions? Because I'm going to close in a minute. Let me just see if I can see everybody. Closed. I've got a little arrow that I have to do. Nobody's got their hand up. Okay, so I shall close it there. It is being recorded, so fingers crossed it'll work this time. And I'll put it up on the website in the next couple of days. So please encourage friends and family, anybody who couldn't make it, who might like to see it, to watch the recording. And I look forward to seeing you next time, which will be in January.
Lovely.
Finally, thank you very, very much indeed to Paul and to Namwaka for your contributions.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Namwaka.
Thank you.
Thank you to Jane.
And thank you to Jane.
Thanks, Jane.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Paul.
All right. And I'll see you later.
All right. Oh.